Hello, and thank you for joining us for this World Council of Credit Unions virtual event, Housing, Affordability, and Credit Unions, Lessons from Canada to the World. I'm Greg Newman, Director of Communications for World Council of Credit Unions. Before we get started, please take a moment to click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and choose your language, English or Spanish, to make sure you can hear all of today's presentations in your preferred language. Yes, this is essential for English as well. Tómese un momento para hacer clic en interpretación y elija su idioma inglés o español para asegurarse de que puede escuchar esta reunión en su idioma preferido. Like many countries, Canada is currently experiencing rapid increases in home prices above the rate of inflation, which is creating challenges for renters and homeowners. Amid this backdrop, the Conestoga Social Innovation Lab undertook a study of Canadian credit unions to learn what trends and innovations are helping to make housing more affordable. Today, we're joined by the man who led that study. Anthony Piscitelli is the director of the Conestoga Social Innovation Lab at Conestoga College, Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning in Kitchener, Ontario. He is also chair of the board at YNCU Credit Union in Kitchener. Anthony will explore the innovative strategies and partnership opportunities Canadian credit unions are utilizing to gain insights and share many of those with you today. Anthony, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of what research we've done here. So I'm gonna jump right into the presentation, and as I present, I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the things that I found through this research study. I'm also going to share a little bit of some of my personal experiences. I am the chair of the board of Your Neighborhood Credit Union, or YNCU, which is a credit union located here in Ontario, Canada. And I'm also going to share a little bit about some of the other research partners that I've worked with and some of their experiences around housing. So my research tends to specialize in board governance and housing. So we've got a little bit from both of those worlds that I'll probably bring into the presentation. Now, before I jump into the meat of the presentation, I want to give you a little bit of what I think about when I approach housing as an issue. And the first thing that I want to say, and in Canada in particular, and I would argue probably around the world, that housing is a problem and a challenge that really does require government leadership to solve. In Canada, we've gotten to the point where I would argue we've moved beyond a housing crisis, and we've moved into a system where we have systematic challenges right built into our housing system. Crises tend to be like COVID-19, they're episodic, they're specific solutions that you can implement in a short time frame to address. Whereas housing, once it becomes a systemic issue, requires systemic changes to address. And I would suggest kind of fundamental to that is some sort of government leadership. Housing is not a true free market. The reality is in housing around the world, there are government subsidies that help make that possible. In Canada, it's typically the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which provides things like loan insurance. In the United States, it would be Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that serve those same functions. In addition, we see that housing is really built based on zoning regulations, based on government intervention through the providing of amenities like water, like roads. So this is a housing market is something that the credit union can have an influence on. And I would argue that we can have a profound influence on housing, but we should recognize that housing is a system that really does require government leadership and government intervention to work. So this is not something that we at the credit union system can hope to solve on our own. But what we can hope to do is have an impact and hopefully make the lives a little bit easier and a little bit better for our members. And if we do that, as I'll argue at the end, I think we can have an influence on government and on the system as a whole. Now, when we think about housing in Canada, we tend to gravitate towards CMHC's housing continuum. And I think this is a nice framework for us to use for our consideration here today as well. Under the CMHC housing continuum, the idea is that we want to get all individuals into some sort of market affordable or community housing that can be, or supportive housing that can be long-term housing for them to live in, for all of their all individuals' basic needs to be met. Essentially, what we're trying to do is move people from homelessness out of emergency shelters possibly through transitional housing, into this permanent housing that is affordable for them. And when we say affordable, in Canada, we tend to use 30% of pre-tax income as what we define as affordable. So there's two terms I'm going to throw around here, and they're very similar. When I talk about affordable housing, I'm talking about purpose-built housing that is designed for individuals to live in, that is below market rate and fits that 30% cutoff. When I talk about housing that is affordable, I'm talking about any housing that is within somebody's affordability target. So housing that is affordable would include market housing. If I'm talking about affordable housing, I am specifically talking about purpose-built housing that is affordable for individuals. The work that I'm sharing right now, and we'll drop a link in the chat for this, is from a research study that we conducted over the past 6 months with the Canadian Credit Union Association. I am, for the most part, going to walk through what we covered in that study. There will be some items in it that are really only relevant to Canada, so I won't be covering all of those in detail here today. But if you'd like to look at those, please take time to read through the report. So today I'm going to talk about 11 relevant trends that I think are really useful for international credit union leaders to consider. I think each of these could be implemented in credit unions around the world, or could be done in partnership with multiple credit unions coming together. They are based on interviews with credit union leaders here in Canada. And you'll see at the very end, I've also highlighted a gap, something that our credit union leaders did not see, and I did not include in the report, but I've since learned and I think would be really relevant for a Canadian and international audience. So I'm going to start by jumping into talking about shared equity. Shared equity is something that I think could have a really profound impact on housing around the world. In a shared equity model, essentially what happens is investors purchase a share in the future value of a home. So when the home is sold, or when the homeowner decides that they would like to buy out the investor, that's when the investor gets their return on investment. In a pure shared equity model, the way this works is if housing prices go up when the homeowner sells, the investors make money along with the housing owner. If housing prices drop, the investors lose money along with the homeowner. There are not many shared equity models here in Canada. One of my research partners is Arborough. They're one of only a handful of shared equity providers here in Canada. And their model works very much like that. You can take this with a grain of salt. They are my research partner. And they are a model that I think is worth looking at, and one that works very well in favor of the homeowners, but also in favor of the investors. With the shared equity product, I would caution you to be careful out there. There are many shared equity products that I would argue are very much slanted towards the investors and may not be in a homeowner's best interest. Now, shared equity for an individual who is looking to purchase a home really does provide an opportunity for individuals without access to intergenerational wealth to get into the housing market a little bit easier, and often a little bit sooner than they would otherwise. We see in Canada that many first-time home buyers do rely on their parents to help them with the initial down payment. For those that don't have access to that intergenerational wealth, a shared equity product can be very helpful. Shared equity for me, though, first came on my radar in 2019 when Stephen Polis, who was the governor of the Bank of Canada, was presenting at a Canadian Credit Union Association conference. So the Bank of Canada is very similar to the Fed in the United States. So this would be the equivalent of the Fed chair speaking. And when Stephen Polis spoke, he talked about research done by Atif Mian and Amir Sufi around housing debt. And their thesis, their argument was that housing debt in 2007 and 2008 were major causes of the housing crisis that we saw in the United States and Canada and around the world. And what they argue in their book is that a big cause of that housing crisis was the fact that homeowners, when they were hit with these drop in equity values in their homes, were not in a position to bear that loss of income or loss of housing value. And what they suggest is, and what Polis argues, is that the economic system would be much better served if institutional investors, wealthy individuals as well, were invested and sharing in those losses. So the idea is through shared equity, you can actually make an economic system that is more resilient to changes in housing prices, which often are the cause of recessions around the world, which we know have devastating effects on employment, have devastating effects on individuals. So shared equity is something that is both, in my mind, exciting if done properly for individuals, as it can help open up home ownership to more people, but it is also something that has a real economic incentive that can really help make a more resilient economic system for countries that have a large portion of their mortgages that are backed by shared equity providers. So really the distinction here is, a mortgage is the loan is made entirely to the homeowner, whereas shared equity, the loan is made to the homeowner, but a portion of the equity, a portion of the building that they've purchased is not actually owned by them. It's not saying that somebody's going to come into your house and join you for breakfast, but it's not owned by the individual, that homeowner. Instead, when they go and sell the house, they have to pay some of that to the person that helped come up with the initial down payment. Now, the next trend that I can talk about is rent to own. Rent to own is very much what it sounds like. In a rent to own model, individuals rent a home, and when they enter into that initial rental agreement, they also enter into some sort of a purchase agreement. And that purchase agreement can fall into one of two categories. The purchase agreement can be the renters agreeing to purchase the home at a set value at a time in the future, or they can have the right but not the obligation to purchase that home at a set value in the future. Although sometimes there could be other mechanisms where maybe it's based on the market price. Essentially, though, the core of this product is signing a lease agreement that includes the right and potentially the obligation to purchase a home at a later point of time. Rent-to-own agreements are not that common here in Canada. They are a little more common in other places around the world. I have seen them work in Canada very well. And in all of the circumstances so far that I've seen where they work well and in the interest of the homeowner, it has been with government involvement. I have yet to see a rent-to-own agreement that I felt was really in the renter's interest, that did not have some involvement of either the government of Canada or a provincial government, just like a state government, or CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which is a government-owned Crown corporation. So if you are looking to enter a rent-to-own agreement and you are looking to partner with someone who provides rent-to-own agreements, this is an area that I would encourage you to have some caution. So when we talked about shared equity, there is obviously an opportunity to provide mortgages for individuals that have shared equity products. And there's also would be potentially an opportunity for credit unions to develop those shared equity products themselves. Rent-to-own, I would suggest probably your main opportunity would be in developing a rent-to-own model or partnering with a rent-to-own provider and providing that, promoting that service to your members. I think there is an opportunity here, though, to really develop a new rent-to-own agreement, a rent-to-own process that is member-centric. This would take a fair bit of work and potentially multiple credit unions collaborating together. But in your country, if you think that rent-to-own is an option, I would encourage you to think about, is there a way that you as a credit union can work with other credit unions or work with other investors to design a rent-to-own product that is really member-centric and meets their needs, while also providing some profitability for your credit union. Next trend that I heard in my interviews was talking about impact investment and impact investments in the affordable housing space, or focused on improving housing affordability. Impact investing are investments that are focused on providing a return while addressing some sort of environmental or social cause. Impact investing falls within within an investing continuum that I like to use. So this investing continuum ranges from traditional investing, which would be what most people do when they invest in the stock market or purchase a GIC at a bank or credit union, all the way to venture philanthropy, which is essentially charitable donations. And in the middle are different types of responsible and impact investments. And essentially what distinguishes these different types of investments is if individuals are seeking a market return, and the degree of impact and environmental and social factors that are considered as part of their investment criteria. So with ethical investing, we would have individuals that are very much seeking market returns, but they're using some sort of screens around ESG principles to try and make sure that their investments meet certain ethical criteria. Ethical investing is typically focused on screening out investments. Sustainable investing would be investors that are focused primarily on environmental factors. We can then go to thematic impact investing, which takes a little bit farther. You're still seeking a competitive market return, but you're focused in on a specific area. So this could be affordable housing with the goal of making a market return. You can take it a step farther and still seek a return. So you want to make some return on your investment, but you're willing to give up a market return. So you're willing to accept less than market return, risk-adjusted market return. And here would be to have some sort of a specific impact, and then you could go all the way up to the charitable lens. So this is my first kind of pause point, and I want an opportunity for you to complete the poll, and if Cassandra can maybe drop that on the screen. And I've got 6 options here, unsure being the last one on this poll. So the first option is traditional investing. And here, the main consideration is investors who are seeking a market return. The second option here is ethical investing. And here would be your credit union screening out some members based on specific ethical criteria. We have sustainable investing next, which is where you focus on the environment in your loans. Thematic impact investing is next, and here we are trying to improve our community housing situation first while seeking a market return as well. Impact first investing would be the next step, and here you'd be taking a lower return on your mortgages to help out your communities. And then the last one is for those that aren't sure. So, and I will be reading all of these to make sure that we can get the translation through properly. So please take a quick moment to vote on those. And Cassandra, once you've got the votes in, if you could drop them on the screen for me to see and share with everyone. Right, we'll give you a couple more seconds. Oh, disappeared on me. And there it is. So I made a prediction ahead of time. My prediction was a little bit off. I thought most of you would be thinking about this as a traditional investment. It's interesting that that second is the ethical investing. So I hadn't thought that would be the next option. The third option would be the thematic investment. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit. All of those that said traditional investing, I think, and this may not be an implicit thing, I think part of the reason that we as credit unions offer mortgages is because we are trying to improve our housing situation. And I think that underlying, our purpose as an entity is to provide mortgages that meet our members' needs, and that market return is a secondary consideration. YNCU essentially almost exclusively only offers market return mortgages, but I still think of that personally, kind of my governance hat on, as trying to improve our community housing situation. And then the market return is what we need in order to be able to continue to offer those mortgages in the future. All right, so let's keep going here. I do want to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. And I do see some comments in the chat. So please feel free, if you've got questions or comments in the chat, do feel free to drop them in. And I see Mike's here. Mike, I'm going to talk about your program in a little bit too. So I will keep an eye on those at the end for those that have questions. So the next item that I want to talk about is thematic savings products. So these primarily take the form of guaranteed investment certificates or GICs. And there's really 2 types that we found in Canada. The first GIC was one that was offered by Kindred Credit Union, which is a competitor of YNCU's, or a cooperative competitor here in Kitchener. And they offer an affordable housing GIC. And what's interesting about that GIC is they make the goal to take every dollar that's invested in that GIC and then invest them in affordable housing projects right here in their own community. And the idea behind that is partly that it provides some funding to be able to do those impact investments, but it also provides a mechanism for the membership to really connect the purpose of the credit union to housing and to their own community. And lastly, it provides a mechanism for the membership to feel like that they're having a positive impact on their community, and it provides a mechanism for the membership to engage in impact investing themselves. The next on the list is GICs that are designed to provide a small donation to a housing charity. So these would be impact first GICs, where the membership takes a slightly lower return on their GIC, but they know that a small amount, say 25 basis points, are going to a housing charity in their own community. YNCU is one of the credit unions that offers this type of GIC, and we've partnered with Habitat for Humanity, Jimmy Carter's favorite charity, and a portion of the Habitat for Humanity GICs is donated to the local Habitat for Humanity chapter. So it's a way for our members to have a GIC, but also make an impact first investment and know that they're contributing to their own communities. I also heard about co-ownership mortgages in my talk. And this is a mortgage product that allows two people who are not married or in a relationship to purchase a home together. Oftentimes, you'll see duplexes are purchased in this way in Canada. And the co-ownership mortgage is specifically designed to meet the needs of two borrowers that aren't related purchasing a home together. And essentially, it looks very similar to most other mortgages that you would provide, except you're also, as part of the process, going to be providing some support to the two buyers so that they really do understand the implications of what they're purchasing together, and that they've really thought through how they're going to exit the building. You know, what happens if one of the co-owners wants to move out and the other one doesn't? Is there going to be an ability for one homeowner to buy out the other one? What happens if one homeowner thinks that they need to do some repairs and the other homeowner doesn't? So mechanisms need to be put in place, and these things need to be thought of in advance. So this is a product that credit unions can specialize in. It is a product you can just offer on your own, but I would argue if you are offering this, and the credit unions we talk to, they have really thought through a process to support their members to make sure that they really understand what they're purchasing and that they understand the implications that they'll have throughout the life of the mortgage and really the life of living with a co-owner that they're not in a relationship with. We also heard about a number of other mortgages. There was no kind of umbrella term, so I just sort of invented one as part of the report. So this isn't an academic term you're going to see elsewhere, but essentially we were talking a lot about mortgages for non-traditional homes. And you see a number of these starting to rise in Canada, and a number of these are rising around the world. And you see things like secondary units. So this is people taking a home, renovating it, maybe to rent it out, a secondary unit, or maybe to provide a second suite to have a family member live in. We also see accessory dwelling units. So this would be something that is separate from the home. A category of these could be shipping container homes. Laneway homes are another thing we see kind of rising. We also see tiny homes sort of coming up. So these are very, very small homes. And then last, we see properties on leased lands. And what we heard from our credit union partners, our credit union interviewees around this was, yes, we know how to do these things already, but there were two challenges. One challenge was the community didn't know that we knew how to do these things. And the second challenge was they don't do these very often. So even though there are sort of existing products that exist that can fit these categories, there is often some value in specializing in these areas and getting a little bit deeper knowledge so that they can provide real support to individuals that are coming for a mortgage or coming for a second mortgage or a loan to make some major changes to their home. So this is both an opportunity and an opportunity that brings some risk. Risk if you don't pursue it, if it kind of really takes off in your market, but also risk if you do pursue it and you're not really offering great service to your members because you don't really understand this product well. We did hear a little bit in the interviews that credit unions often would reach out to their colleagues who they knew were doing these products a little bit more often. And this is something that I think the credit union system can really benefit from cooperation amongst cooperatives, in that if you are specialized in one of these areas and like you let your colleagues know at conferences, you can kind of become a resource there. And the flip is if you're not specialized in one area, then you can go and access these resources from other credit unions in a way that I would suggest that banks are probably not as keen to be cooperative around. Now, we also saw a theme around halal mortgages taking off a little bit in Canada. And these are mortgages that align with Islamic tenets and facilitate Muslim homeownership, particularly amongst those Muslims who believe that they cannot take on interest. And there were three categories of Muslim home ownership that we talked about. The first, the Murbaha, and I apologize if I pronounce any of these wrong, is where a financial institution buys the property and sells it at an agreed upon profit margin. So this one looks very much like rent to own. The next, the Masharaka, is a financial institution jointly purchases with the homeowner, and the home is slowly purchased back. So this looks a little bit closer to a co-equity mortgage or a shared equity product, with the distinction that instead of the purchase at the end, it's slowly purchased back over time. And then the HRA, which is leased to homeowners at a fixed rate, fixed rental rate. So this also looks very much like a rent-to-own product. So these are our three products. I would suggest in Canada, they are taking off as more immigration brings more Muslims to the community. And I would suggest these are products that around the world, if you're not currently offering them, may be something that you want to consider, particularly if you have many Muslims in your community, or if you see Muslims starting to immigrate to your community. We also, in this study, came across two unique models of cooperative housing. The first one was Union Sustainable Development Cooperative, which I should highlight is another one of my research partners, and they are the research partner that really got me into the housing space. So I do teach, as I noted, at Conestoga College. I'm now director of a research center, but I did teach at the college. And what you'll find at Conestoga College, which is essentially a community college for those in the United States, most of the research at colleges and community colleges tend to be really community focused. And Union Sustainable Development Co-op is a local cooperative that approached me as they were trying to launch, and they asked for some research support, and we were able to work together to get some research grants. And the reason they needed some help is they were trying to develop an entirely new model of cooperative. And essentially what they were taking was the land trust model and the co-op model and an investment co-op model and sort of blending them together. And the idea behind Union Sustainable Development Co-op is that individuals living in a community can become a member of the co-op, and that membership entitles them to purchase investment shares. And these investment shares were then pooled together along with some community foundations that came and purchased bonds. And Union Sustainable Development purchased their first property for $16 million, have approximately 85 units. And this is a way for individuals in the community to make impact investment in cooperative housing. The membership is now a blend of the individuals living in the co-op housing and the individuals that have purchased the investment shares to help get this off the ground. And like other impact investments, this is one where individuals are making an investment because they know they can have a positive impact in their community. And this is likely to end up being an impact first investment for most, as be probably a lower return than if you had invested in the stock market or a REIT, although it'll probably be a higher return than if you're investing in a GIC. So this Union Sustainable Development Co-op model, I would suggest, is a model that could be replicated in other communities across Canada, and certainly a model that could be replicated around the world. So where do credit unions fit in a new model like this? I would suggest there's a couple of ways. First, oftentimes credit unions are connected to their communities. If you know that there are housing challenges and you hear people starting to talk about how can we address this, I would suggest sharing the union co-op model, encouraging them to consider a co-op model rather than the traditional nonprofit route as a mechanism to address housing shortages in your community or affordability issues. Union Sustainable Development Co-op also needed the help of credit unions to secure their first mortgage. It's a unique model. Who better than to understand that unique cooperative model than a credit union, which is also a cooperative? So the other way that you can support this is if you do hear about a unique co-op model that is trying to address housing affordability through renters by providing affordable rental housing, providing them a mortgage and working with them to provide a mortgage can be a way that you can help the community. and often doesn't even really require you to take less than a market return. They just need someone that understands the model and understands the level of risk and is willing to work with them. The next model is something called Community Wealth Cooperative Corporation. And this is a really innovative model. And it's one that I see Mike is here and he's posted in the chat, and he is really the driver behind this model. And essentially, what Community Wealth Cooperative does is it provides a mechanism for home ownership through a cooperative. And what the community wealth model has done is they are developing new housing, and they are helping individuals purchase that housing at well below market rate. And the way they're doing this is by foregoing the typical profit that a developer would have at the sale time. Instead, they've combined their model with a shared equity model. They are holding back a percentage of the purchase price, and they are keeping that as Community Wealth Cooperative Corporation's asset. Then, when an individual chooses to sell Community Wealth Cooperative, that's when they earn their profit. So, and I don't know the final numbers. I don't believe they're finalized yet, but imagine it's 15%. So they managed to drive down the price by 15% at sale, but when the home is later sold, Community Wealth Cooperative takes that 15% as their profit, and they can now use that to invest in future development. And essentially what this model is designed to do is to build housing in perpetuity using a cooperative. It's a unique model that I had not been familiar with before learning about the Community Wealth Cooperative Corporation. And it is one that I think is really ripe for expansion around the world. I'm not getting into all the details here, but Community Wealth Cooperative has also worked very hard to leverage many funding mechanisms, many government programs, many non-government programs here in Canada to make sure that they're able to offer the house as competitively as any for-profit developer would in terms of the development. And then they drive the price down even farther by offering that 15%. And this is maybe a little lesson for co-ops to keep in mind if you are involved in housing development, is those government programs, those subsidies that exist, and that's really what they are, even if they're called different names, that for-profit developers are accessing. As a cooperative, you have to make sure that you can access those too. Indeed, a lot of the research that I actually did with Union Sustainable Development Co-op was working with some accounting agencies to figure out the ideal tax treatment to make Union Sustainable Development Cooperative able to compete with REITs and other corporations. The next item on our list is pooled accounts. And this is an interesting one that I think is ripe for expansion across Canada and around the world. Co-op pooled accounts tend to exist right now in BC and Ontario, but not most other provinces that I saw. And essentially what these are is accounts that are offered to nonprofit associations, nonprofit housing associations, and cooperative housing associations. And the way the pooling works is these associations make the pool available to all of their individual co-op housing members or affordable housing providers. And what they say is if you deposit your accounts with, and it's Vancity and Coastal Capital's savings in BC that offer this. So if you deposit it in one of these accounts, you will get the interest rate based on the entire pool, not just your individual amount. So, if the pool is 20 million, but an individual cooperative puts in $500,000, they get interest as though they had put in 20 million. So they get a little bit higher interest rate. In addition, these pools also will do a small kickback to the nonprofit association, the co-op housing association, so providing a little bit of a funding mechanism for them as part of it. So, it's a little bit of a reward for them promoting the pool and doing that work. And in addition, these credit unions, as they've started to get more co-op housing members or affordable housing members, they've also started to specialize other products in servicing these areas. So once you've got co-ops as your members, you start to realize what their unique needs are as you interact with them more, and you're able to develop specialized services and really meet the needs of that sector. So I really like this as an entryway into getting new members into the credit union, and as a mechanism to expand your services and then learn more about those members and continue to grow that membership base. The last one from the report is one that I'm highlighting. I know you're all doing it already, and this is grants and donations to affordable housing causes. I do want to highlight, though, there was some specific ones that came out. So the common one is, you give a donation to an affordable housing provider when they're building a new building, or maybe as ongoing support. The interesting ones were rent banks, rent guarantees, and organizations addressing homelessness. So the rent banks are essentially situations that help individuals to get into rental housing by providing a little bit of support there. The guaranteed funds are relatively similar in that they provide a guarantee. So if an individual is renting and they are having a hard time finding a rental property, but they should be able to afford their rent, the rent guarantee program is designed to be a co-signer on that rental agreement. And if the individual can't afford their rent, then the rent guarantee fund kicks in. The rent bank works on the other end, and essentially, if somebody can't afford their rent, they can go to the rent bank and get some one-time support to help them out of the situation. The last is this organizations to addressing homelessness. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about the coldest night of the year program. So I know a lot of credit unions are donating to homelessness organizations, but one of the unique things that has sort of organically happened here in credit unions in Ontario or in Canada is many have partnered with the organization Coldest Night of the Year, which is an organization that exists in Canada and the United States, and I think could be expanded around the world. And essentially what this organization does is it brings homelessness providers that are addressing homelessness in individual communities together, and they all fundraise on the same night every year and enjoy, and people engage in a charitable walk. For those in Canada, and they've just opened it, I've walked the last 2 years with YNCU, and I've greatly enjoyed this. And what we see is that over 20 credit unions here in Canada have already started participating in this. And one of the things that I would suggest here in Canada and in the United States is that there is some real potential to partner with other credit unions and to try and get most credit unions in the country actually participating in Coldest Night of the Year. And then that can be something that is really known as an event that credit unions participate in and contribute back to their own communities. And for communities outside of Canada and the United States, I think this is a unique model that credit unions could actually spur in their own communities. And then you could really be the lead sponsor of it if you are the ones that are actually driving Coldest Night of the Year to happen in your own country. So let's pause again so I can get a drink. And at this point, I want to put another poll up in front of you. And I'd like to talk about what housing related areas does your credit union provide donations to? You can check as many as you want for this. The first on our list is the building of affordable housing. The second is donating directly to affordable housing service providers. Third is rent banks. Fourth is rent guarantee programs. Fifth is other. And if you do pick other, I'd appreciate it if you could describe what the other is in the chat. And six is we do not give to housing related charities because presumably you're supporting other causes. So I'm probably not going to be able to keep up on the reading for this as you go, but I do encourage you to pop it in the chat if you've got an idea. And I'm going to pause for a drink while you fill in your answers. All right, hopefully people have had a chance to finish that up. Cassandra, can you close that poll? Oh, and so more than half don't give to housing related charities, and that's okay. There's other causes credit unions do support. But we see that the most popular is affordable housing service providers directly, and then building of affordable housing. So about half of credit unions are donating to those. Only one is doing a rent guarantee program. We do have 3 doing rent banks. And then we've got 3 others, and they're posted in the chat. So far, Meridian Credit Unions launched Reframe in 2024 to address the skill shortage in building affordable housing. Very clever. I like that program. So the other 2, I encourage you to drop your ideas in the chat as well. So the last item that I'm going to touch on is CMHC's, the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation's Indigenous housing programs. So this is one that I did not touch on the report, and it's one that I would argue is a gap here in Canada. And essentially what CMHC does is they have a program that supports mortgages on leased lands. So Indigenous communities that are community-owned land have the ability to offer mortgages. There's four such programs here in Canada. I'm not going to get into the details of these, but I do want to highlight that they are severely underutilized by credit unions here in Canada, which is why they didn't make it into the report. We focused on Canadian credit union leaders, and they were not on their radar. So I think this is a real opportunity here in Canada. And I want to suggest that this is also an opportunity outside of Canada. There are similar programs that other governments offer to support Indigenous housing. And if they are not offering some such of a program in your community, I would argue that the need is even greater if you have Indigenous communities to figure out a way to support housing on leased land. And I would bring it back to that many credit unions are doing housing supports and mortgages on leased land. So it is simply a matter of finding a way to make these leased land mortgages fit for an Indigenous community as well. And I think this is an opportunity where countries that are serious and credit unions that are serious about Indigenous reconciliation, this is a way that we can have a really positive impact on Indigenous communities that is a natural extension of the work that we are already trying to do as credit unions. So with that, I do want to talk about 6 specific opportunities that I've sort of mentioned in passing, but I think are real opportunities that could work around the world. So the first that I want to suggest, and it's one that I would argue that there's kind of a couple of pathways to get this working effectively, is through the Community Builder GIC and the idea of impact investment. So I would suggest that Community Builder GIC could be a mechanism that credit unions use to support the building of nonprofit and affordable housing. It could also be a mechanism, depending on your community, and providing mortgages potentially at a little bit lower rate. And it could be a mechanism that, depending on your regulator, this would be difficult to do in Canada, but could be used as a mechanism to provide funding to do impact investments that could go into mortgages or building credit union, building affordable housing projects with credit union support. Similarly, I think impact investing is something that credit unions may want to consider. There obviously are capital implications for this, so it is something you have to think carefully about. I am a credit union board chair, so I recognize we can't just offer really low impact investments. We do have to make a profit, and we do have to make a profit that allows our capital ratios to stay strong. But this is an area that I think credit unions could really think seriously about and could have a positive impact on your communities, while also really demonstrating to your communities what it is different about investing in a credit union versus a traditional financial institution. Shared equity is another opportunity that I see out there, and it's one that I see as a potential reciprocal relationship. So I think there is some possibility for credit unions to potentially develop a shared equity product themselves. But I think the stronger opportunity is probably finding a shared equity provider that you feel is serving the community well and would serve your members well. And if you can do that, a partnership with that shared equity mortgage provider could allow you to provide mortgages to their clients and turn them into credit union members, while also providing your members a mechanism to get access to a shared equity product. Next, I think there is an opportunity for credit unions to seed the cooperative movement. So this education around cooperatives is an area where I think credit unions could serve as a leadership role in sharing the home opportunities model around the world and the union co-op or the investment co-op model around the world, and encouraging local individuals, perhaps even spearheaded by your credit union, to develop these co-op models and to either improve housing affordability through rental or improve access to home ownership. And then lastly, the coldest night of the year, I think, is a tremendous opportunity. And again, YNCU does participate in this program, and I've walked the last 2 years, and I will say I've had a lot of fun walking. It's a great opportunity as a board member for me to get to interact with staff and some members. So what I see as this opportunity, though, is multifaceted. So first, I see it as a mechanism to promote to our members and to show to our members our concern for community. But I also see coldest night of the year as a mechanism for us to promote to our members the opportunity for them to engage in a program that raises money for homelessness. I think there's an opportunity for credit unions to sponsor teams, probably mostly staff, could potentially be some members walking on those teams as well. I think board members would probably enjoy, I know board members would enjoy doing this. I'm a board member who loves doing this every year. And it would also be an opportunity for credit unions to donate directly to Coldest Night of the Year, and that creates some sponsorship opportunities and also an impact. I also think that there really is a bigger opportunity here for the credit union system in Canada and the United States to build a partnership with the Coldest Night of the Year team and really make it a national program that credit unions participate in and something that credit unions are really known for. And the opportunity outside of Canada and the United States, I would argue, is even greater. I think this Coldest Night of the Year model is a great model and is one that could be replicated in other countries around the world. And I think credit unions could take a lead on that. And then you really would be known as the sponsors of Coldest Night of the Year, as it would be a program that you were driving as a system. So I'm going to present the last poll opportunity before I open it up for questions. And I'd like to know which opportunities presented here today do you think are most relevant to your credit union? And we've got 6 options here. The first one is the Community Builder GIC. The second one is impact investments. The third is partnering with a shared equity provider. The fourth is supporting new cooperative models. The fifth is joining Coldest Night of the Year. And the sixth is other. And if you've got another, if you could please explain that in the chat, that would be appreciated. So I'll pause once again for you to fill that poll out. All right, Cassandra, I think we can probably close that poll now and share those results. Oh, this is interesting. I did not expect this coming in. So people really like the idea of supporting the new cooperative models, with a third of individuals picking that. Shared equity was the second. So my impassioned pitch for Coldest Night of the Year did not bump it up on our charts. And then we've got one other, so please do share your other idea in the chat. So with that, I do want to conclude, and I want to conclude with 2 thoughts. And they're sort of broader thoughts around the credit union system. And I would suggest that there are 2 really broad opportunities that really kind of do overlap. And that first part of that opportunity is, as credit unions, we're member-centric organizations. And we are in a position to really understand the needs of our members. And we are in a position, more so than I would argue banks, to really try and meet those needs as our primary driver. And when we do that, I would suggest credit unions can pioneer innovations, that we can introduce new things that really meet the needs of our members. And if we do that really well, I would argue we can drive societal change. And we've seen this in the past in Canada. Canadian credit unions are really proud that we were the first institution to lend money to women in their own name, for example. And we saw very shortly after doing that, all of the banks started following suit. So I think this is where we can really drive societal changes. If we pioneer something, if we do something really well, pretty soon the rest of the financial system sees that there's profit in that, and they start to do it too. But if we do that in a way that is focused on the members, that profit motive will not lead to the members being harmed when the society as a whole picks up this new opportunity, this new way of doing things. So I would encourage credit unions to really think about, how can we drive innovation for our members and use that as a mechanism to have a positive impact on society generally. With that, I do want to close by thanking some of my sponsors of my research for here. So CCUA was involved. I did receive some funding from a couple of Canadian organizations, MyTex and the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council. And I also want to thank all of my research participants. You can see them all listed here, and there were a few that didn't want to be named. They were very helpful in informing the report. And lastly, I want to thank my co-authors on the study, and appreciated their assistance. And with that, I will open it up to questions, and I think I'm going to stop sharing for the questions. And I will say, earlier I referenced a talk. Cassandra, at the very end, I forgot to mention this, we'll share that YouTube video with you. I didn't share it earlier because Governor of the Bank of Canada, I probably can't compete with that. I didn't want you all to leave to listen to his talk before I
Well, we want to thank you, Anthony. I mean, the one thing I would say is that, judging from the report, it was obvious you were knowledgeable on this, but that didn't translate your passion for this. And so I think that really came through in this webinar, and we really thank you for joining us and giving this information. We do have some questions that people have for you. James asks, with the theme of credit unions to improve community and serve Canadians' needs, I understand the position of impact investing in mortgages. My question is when it comes to alternative data or credit flexibility and the intersection of affordability, are there any alternative data points, credit worthiness indicators, or personal considerations your credit union has taken to accommodate and extend mortgages for affordable housing?
That's interesting. So I'm board chair, so I'm not directly involved in the lending. So I can't get into the specifics around that in a way that would be fair to YNCU. I will, if I can take this in kind of an alternative direction. One of the things that I'm really proud that YNCU did was in March of 2021 when we saw that interest rates were rising. And the Canadian system is set up a little bit different than the United States, where people have to refinance their mortgages, they'll refinance at whatever the current rate is. So you don't lock in a 30-year fixed, you lock in for 5 years at a time. So one of the things we did as a credit union is we reached out to our members who were in the variable rate product, and we said to them, we think mortgage rates are about to rise. Would you like to lock in your rate now? And it's something that I didn't hear of any other financial institution. Certainly no banks were doing that. The trade-off for us was that we also did some work behind the scenes to make sure that our book was still balanced, swaps and doing some more variable rate products with commercial clients. But it really was in the members' best interest at that time. So I would encourage you, I'm sort of taking this in a different direction, but I would encourage you when you're thinking about these products as a credit union, as a purpose-driven organization, you can really put the purpose front and center when you're thinking about what product you're going to be delivering. And that should be done alongside considering your profitability. Profitability is essential, but I would argue both of those should be done simultaneously, and one is not more important than the other. They need to exist. Profitability needs to exist for your credit union to continue to survive, but your purpose needs to be front and center as well, because that's why you exist at the end of the day. It's not to serve shareholders' interests, it's to serve your members' interests.
Yeah, great point. And another question, by the way, if you do have questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can type them in there. And we still have some time here, so I can ask them of Anthony. Another question for you. Would you be open to speaking with a co-op housing group that is looking to establish themselves under the pooled account model? Equally, personally, would love any resources tied to co-op pooled accounts for housing and how they function.
Yes, I'd be happy to join in that talk. I would encourage you, if you're interested in the pooled accounts, Van City and Coastal Capital Savings are two that offer the pooled accounts in BC, and they were two of the first ones. So if you just Google that, I can't do it right now while we're chatting, but you'll find a bunch of information about their products that jump out front and center.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Did you see this surge in interest in providing some of these variable programs that you talked about today prior to, let's say, 2019? Or had you seen a real burst of these coming onto the scene now that housing prices have gone so high and stayed there?
So I think it's been a mix. So some of these products have been around for a long time. The uh, the housing account Van City has been offering, I don't know for how long. They've certainly been a leader in that space, but we certainly in Canada, we've seen housing prices really spike since 2019. And that has definitely led to a resurgence in interest across the country in addressing this. I would argue that this is something, and this is why I sort of started with this. These are systematic issues that we actually face here in Canada. This is not something that we got to overnight. And there's a long sort of history going back to the 90s and even earlier than that, that has sort of seen this bubble up. And this is why I actually don't use the word crisis, because I think crisis is something that is episodic and you can address with relatively simple solutions. Once you get a systemic problem, you need long-term solutions and you need to really think things through. The Canadian housing situation is such that over 3 million homes are likely need to be built in addition to what was already planned by 2030 to address the housing shortages. So this is something that we as a credit union system, we can't solve that individually, but we are seeing credit unions recognize the need in our communities, and we are reacting to that. And that being said, banks are doing that too. They do see a market opportunity here and are trying to address that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in Toronto last year, and my wife and I love Toronto, and we were saying, can you imagine living here though? Because, you know, even in the most modest neighborhood, you're talking about homes that are well over $1 million Canadian. So I could see the pressures there, and we see it here in the United States too. In most of the urban areas, you're seeing that now, and even in a lot of smaller towns around the country. So I think it's obviously a problem that's happening everywhere. Anthony, we don't have any more questions. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and again, remind people that this is going to be available later on the World Council YouTube channel. If you liked it, you can find it there and other people can see it. I know we've had a couple of people ask if it's going to be available. It is. The full recording is going to be available there on the YouTube channel later today. That's youtube.com/Woku. And if you want to participate in other great educational sessions in person, we are happy to let you know that, and there's the link, youtube.com/Woku, if you want to find the recording of today's webinar. But we want to let you know if you want to participate in other great educational sessions in person, we're happy to let you know that registration for the 2025 World Credit Union Conference just opened within the last hour. World Council is going to be hosting the 20th anniversary of the premier global credit union event in beautiful Stockholm, Sweden next year from July 14th to the 16th. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen right now. If you don't have your phone handy, it's easy. Head to wcuc.org to learn more and register for what promises to be just a great event. We would love to all see you there next summer. That's it for today's webinar. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.